Welcome everyone. I really appreciate you spending your afternoon with us today. The purpose of this particular discussion is to talk about the stages of conscious leadership, just to explore our understanding of the different stages and experiences of each of those stages for our own journeys so far. In terms of outcomes, the outcomes we're really going for today is to have a sense of the most common stages of conscious leadership. So there's kind of multiple stages, and we're really going to focus on narrowing down to 4 today. And to know or hold an inquiry to your own stage of conscious leadership. So as we explore and understand these stages, just thinking, well, where am I at the moment and what might be possible? So what's in it for you, our audience today? We acknowledge that in today's world, there's a high proportion of leaders that are often running with this sense of being in over our heads. And it's not an isolated phenomenon. It's systemic within the times we live. You only just need to look at what's going on in the world at the moment, all of the turbulence and disruption. Times are quite complex and challenging, and that's been the case in corporations for a while too. And we will walk through each stage through a bell curve that will show the distribution of leaders at those various stages throughout the world. So who are we? Who are we in this room?
So my name's Patrick Rowell. I'm a transformation coach at 2% Shift. My leadership experience is mostly in coaching and leading teams, participation and leadership in the Perth Agile community, and also leading transformational change in organisations.
Julie Whitlock. I'm the Associate Director of Engagement and Experience at Murdoch University. I've been in leadership roles for 30-odd years and have led direct teams and indirect teams as well, through quite large organisations, mainly in a transformation role, mainly in a digital role and marketing roles.
Hi, my name's Kevin Squires. I'm the Senior Manager of Agility at the RAC. I think I've been a leader indirectly and directly for a little bit more than 20 odd years now.
Thanks, Kev. And I'm Steve Barrett. I'm a leadership and organizational transformation coach. My primary focus is coaching and facilitating the vertical development of leadership in organizations through these conscious leadership stages that we're going to explore today. And I really do that work in support and service of sustainable change in organizations. Above these 4 stages that we're going to explore today, there are actually 3 broad categories to the leadership levels. The first being pre-conventional, followed by conventional, and then after conventional, post-conventional. These kind of 3 categories. And we're first going to look within the pre-conventional category at the egocentric stage of development. So on the bell curve, this is labeled as the erratic zone. It's a style of leadership where we observe fluctuating results, often more down than up. And if I was to describe the egocentric leadership stage, it's where leaders focus primarily on themselves, neglecting the needs of others. They might flaunt power, maintain a very short-term outlook. They might reject feedback, seeing it as criticism, or externalize blame. Ultimately, from this stage, they're viewing life as a zero-sum game with clear winners and losers. So what do people feel their understanding of the egocentric stage is?
It takes me back to, I think, a time when I first became a leader and was really quite self-conscious about being in the role and I suppose feeling not very good at what was a new space for me to occupy. And I suppose the imposter syndrome for me, perhaps presents. So I think I recall being somewhat controlling and needing to be across everything, and being a bit of a micromanager, which was some feedback that I received. So it's I think it's a common pattern, and one that I learned a lot from.
What do you think the impact of that kind of style of leadership was at that time? Can you remember back that far? Because like I've known you a while, Kevin. I never associate the egocentric, but we all go through these stages. So it was, for me, it must be a long time ago. So as best your memory.
I was younger and thinner. I had darker hair. It was a time of uncertainty as to what my leadership style perhaps was.
These two departments needed to collaborate and work well together in order that the organization could get an outcome. And one of the leaders was strongly in this egocentric style of leadership. And there was a total breakdown between these two leaders. But the egocentric leader was just trying to get things done through control. In the end, the two departments that's trying to work well together couldn't work well together. It was just blame, victim, and blame going on between the two departments, because it was happening at the leadership level, and therefore it cascaded down. It was happening down below. There, everyone's under pressure. There's delays, and that's one of the impacts of this, because they're too focused on the conflict between themselves and each other is wrong. The work is suffering and isn't happening, and therefore delays occur and more blame and more defensiveness. So it impacts others. Because I remember people being under huge pressure and people leaving the organization when you're not treated as a human being and you're under such high amounts of pressure. And it's just a horrible environment to be immersed in. It was at the time when my mum was actually ill, and I was going to fly back to the UK to see my mum. And this leader, this egocentric leader, came out to me, and he showed true, real compassion for my situation. Really, really touched my heart the way he connected to me there. So you know, there's goodness in everybody. It's just what life circumstances have shown up that the egocentric responses that you see in his leadership style had to manifest, because that wasn't truly who he was.
The thing that's scary here for me is seeing this on the world stage. Like when we look at political leaders in the East and the West, and these are people who I think project a reality that appeals to an egocentric part of all of us, and there's a percentage of the population that this really speaks to. And I think it directly speaks to our fears and concerns. Things like, loss of freedom, fear of other, whatever difference that other might represent. And when you play out that egocentric leader scenario into the future, like we know the outcome. History tells us this. It leads to war and poverty and an unequal distribution of resources and social injustice. It's scary that exists on our world stage to me.
Consider the truth of that stage of development. This might not necessarily feel true for somebody egocentric, but if they were really awake to themselves, internally, they'd probably find their confidence is truly desperate. And levels of personal fulfillment are probably mortifying. And their adaptability and resilience to navigate the complexities and challenges of our modern world are quite dismal. So some people remain caught up in this worldview that exerting unilateral power with a carrot and stick approach is all that's needed to achieve organizational goals, with no social awareness or empathy for others, or appreciation for the inner work that's needed to develop their leadership for real impact. So those that start to develop more social awareness and look at addressing a need to fit in through adopting strategies that support their sense of identity and self-worth in relationship with others, then that shifts them into the next stage we call the reactive stage. This is the first of the conventional stages of development, and we've labeled it as the managing zone, which fits nicely with the concept of manager, as we already widely understand. The peaks and valleys of the red line results have now been smoothed out somewhat, but it still resembles more of a flatline situation. And this is actually where the majority of leaders in the world actually are. Around 70% of our leaders are operating from the reactive stage of development. And if I was to describe reactive leaders, so they tend to identify with certain strengths, almost overdeveloping them while underdeveloping others. So they might overplay one or more of the following, especially when under duress and pressure. So seeking harmony in relationship over achieving results, self-protection over productive engagement, and dominance to get things done over building alignment.
So that one hits me squarely in the chest. Like, that's the world
Yes.
of compliance. That's my reactive style. Like, I recognize it in myself. I can think of various stages of my career and life where my kind of inability to speak truth to authority, especially, resulted in some really negative impacts. There was one case, working with a team, needed some software to work on their systems, and I kept kind of saying to my boss, I don't know if we can do what they need doing for the price they need it done at. And I didn't say it very strongly, and I didn't back myself as to, this is why. And the impact of that is that tens of thousands of dollars of people's time and money that could have been avoided had I been able to speak up and not comply in that situation. Like, that was a really hard lesson, one that still wake up in the middle of the night sweating over, thinking, geez, I could have done that better.
And unlike the last stage, I can totally recall my reactive stage of leadership, because it's still with me, like it's still present. And that's this self-protecting one. So it's about protection. It's like it comes down to it. When it comes down to it, it's down to, I don't want to look stupid. So if I don't want to look stupid, I'll need to create some distance. I'll need to go and research. I'll need to go and learn, understand, get the knowledge. Then I can be comfortable and bring it to the rest of the room. And that's served me well in my career, but actually it's also limiting. It's limiting in that I'm not growing others, like we're not doing the work together. I'm not even getting the diversity of other people's thoughts. It's the thinking of one brain versus multiple. And it holds me back as well. Like the anxiety I hold over not wanting to show up.
Yeah, I mean, the being cautious is something that's quite strong in my reactive self. So trying to create good relationships by not rocking the boat and by holding back at times. And that can be reinforced by those dominated characters who you always want to be right, and so are perhaps stronger. And if that's the dominant culture within an organization, it just continues to reinforce and drive out the diversity of thought.
There are gifts in these reactive stages. It's just when they're overplayed and dominate, they become liabilities. But the gifts are certainly there to be had, like looking after relationships, building knowledge and understanding, and the controlling one, which is, is in service of getting things done. So they all have elements which are to be admired. It's just the overplaying of that trait can do greater harm.
in this stage, in the early part of this stage, you think you're doing the right thing, which is I'm looking after my team. But in reality, what you're not doing is letting them grow and feel some of the pain. And I think the ego in you says it's on my shoulders to protect the team, until you realize actually it's not, because you're actually not helping them. It's not until you sit back and reflect that you realize, oh, I could have done that a bit better. So the lesson for me is the reflection bit, because in the moment, sometimes you can't control it. But if you can reflect on it and learn from it, then maybe you can change your reaction in the future.
And this is why I think it's an inward journey, because that reflection after, how do you get that happening in the moment, right here, right now? And that's where the inward development and the advancing through these development stages, that's the promise. It will get you there, that you'll be able to respond always the way you want to, whatever the circumstances, whatever shows up.
Your comment about knowledge resonates with me too, Steve, around needing to be the expert. And I think that's played out in my need to, my hoarding of information, the need that I need to consume more in order to be better. And I haven't let that one go. It still is an inbuilt thing where I just can't resist subscribing to another newsletter or buying another book. There's this inner desire that I'm not enough, and therefore others have the knowledge that I need to absorb. And so your comment does resonate a lot with that need to be an expert.
Maybe you want to explore the truth of that stage, and it's evident that there's limiting confidence in the face of modern world pressures. So when we're under pressure, those traits really are showing up, and it quite often comes from a place where our confidence is quite limited. Lackluster levels of personal fulfillment. We can all feel that duress, pressure, and geez, that was a hard day at work. So our personal fulfillment and our leadership approach, we might not always show up the way we want to show up because it's just the stress of the situation. And in terms of our adaptability and resilience, quite often we're challenged there, navigating the complexities and challenges of the world. Okay, so the key to progressing through this part of the curve lies in continuing our developmental journey. And it's really about harnessing our innate resourcefulness for growth. And so by accessing more of our potential, we can bring more benefits to the organization, to our relationships, and actually to ourselves as well. So that will take us into the creative stage of development. And this stage, we've labeled this as performing. And this is where results now are ticking upwards. We're doing well, right? 20% of leaders are kind of around this stage of development for leaders. So creative leaders are less self-centric. They're more focused on developing the capacity and capability of the organization. They're approachable. They're skilled in working with people. They listen well. They build high-performing teams, and they mentor and develop the capability in others, and they empower their people. Creative leaders embody their vision with calmness, integrity, and courage, and they work strategically and systemically to improve performance, impact, and results.
I think the word that resonates with me is the calm approach. The excellent leaders that I have observed have all got that trait. There's no panic. It's just that calmness, regardless of what happens. Crises can happen, but there's still a calmness about them.
I think when it was being described, I thought, wow, this is a real growth opportunity for me. It's just a natural tendency for us to all focus on what we can do better and maybe not celebrate what we do well. Because I do recognize, like I've had feedback that I can be quite calm, and I've had feedback that I do develop people well, but I just naturally gravitate to, yeah, am I really in this space or not?
And I joined the REC to work for Kevin, not to work for the REC, to work for Kevin, because he was the type of leader that would create the space where I'm empowered to make the choices that will fulfill what the organization, what he wanted. So I felt empowered and supported by Kev. And when he was moved from one part of the organization to the other, it was enough for me to leave the organization. So, people talk about quitting their bosses. It was the reverse for me. I joined because of the boss, right? So I'm glad there were snippets in there where you recognize what others say, and I just want to go, yeah.
Thank you. I feel humbled.
These advances through stages is always a transcend and include. So it's not like you leave reactive behind and now you're creative. It includes those reactive stages. It includes those egocentric stages. But seeing things holistically and blending and bringing what the moment requires, you can see more. It's like being higher up on a balcony or on the mountain to see more, have more choice about how you respond, versus lower down the mountain. You haven't got much of a view and you've only got one way to respond.
When I think about showing up reactively, the feelings that I associate most with that for me are, anxiety. It's the waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, the kind of dreading getting up and going to work, and what are the things I've got to face today? And then the contrast was I had the opportunity to lead and grow and build a team of coaches in a large organization over about 18 months. And like one of the key differences for me in that is an internal sense of I've got this. And the energy was very different. The energy was it was fun. Like I enjoyed hanging out and working with these people. And I spent less time worrying about how am I going to achieve an outcome and just working with people to achieve the outcome. And the real enjoyment was I got to work with people and grow people, and having these coaches step into their own leadership and seeing them have like real impact with their customers was phenomenal.
When there's been particularly challenging situations, I've noticed that I can almost disassociate, and it's not from lack of empathy or connection, but it's, to your point, Paget, I've got this, I know what I'm doing, and I'm not, the anxiety of dealing with it that I would have had many, many years ago is not present, because I know I'm confident in order to deal with it. And as much as two different scenarios, many, many years apart, are very similar, the anxiety back in the day that was present and the lead up into it and the sleepless nights and the scenario playing out to try and prepare for a situation, versus now, where if you know you've got it, the anxiety is a lot more reduced. But also I noticed myself almost being outside of myself, observing the scenario play out.
So just to wrap up the creative stage, thinking about the truth of the impact of that stage. So I think here is where you would have robust confidence, right? In the face of modern world pressures. Personal fulfillment, really comforting levels. Like you're going to be pretty content with your leadership style and your leadership approach. And pretty capable in terms of adaptability and resilience in navigating complexities and challenges that come your way. So when working with leaders at the creative level, they often encounter what we call this good enough line, which separates the conventional from the post-conventional developmental stages. And on this line, there's a temptation to settle for good enough, right? But the truth is, good enough traps you. It prevents you from fully accessing your innate wholeness. Good enough can still be limiting in today's fast-paced, exponentially changing world. So the truth is, once you experience the profound impact of a deeper developmental journey that transforms organizations and people's lives, including your own, then you're shifting towards this last stage we're going to explore, the integral stage. And this stage is transforming. This is a super happy place to be. And if the light green zone was incremental in performance, the performance in this zone is exponential and accelerates. So integral leaders have an expanding vision that encompasses the welfare of the larger interdependent system in which their organization exists. As architects of the future, they seamlessly unfold the emergence of their vision, prioritizing enduring success over fleeting wins, and skillfully navigate and harmonize complex relationships and diverse needs. Integral leaders are catalysts for innovation, adeptly overcoming challenges with grace and ease. They foster a culture of relentless inquiry and transformative collective action, driving their organizations towards exceptional and sustainable growth.
I'm reminded of the conversation we had this morning where Cav was talking about a Jackson Pollock painting and, recognizing that integral leadership is only 5% of the population at most. And you see in any organizations the range of response as different colors on the canvas. And I'm starting to get a sense and see little bits of teal of that 5% here and there. Right? It's not everywhere, it's not ubiquitous, but we probably think of people in our lives or people in the world, people in our organizations that tend to operate there a little bit more often or more frequently. As a magnetism.
Mhm.
I like the example of the world leaders you talked about, but I also think that's setting the bar really, really high. And I think there's examples of integral leadership that's present in the world, that in people that we know and work with. I want to reflect my experience of you when you came back from an overseas trip for a client, where, as my understanding, you were working with a system of leaders on a multinational global initiative where you were bringing leaders in a supply chain for a new initiative together and then working with them on the vision on how to coordinate the timeline and the rollout of this system. And the way you reflected that experience to me was you were, one, working at a very senior level, two, created an environment of safety and vulnerability for people to talk about what was really important to them and the vision for what they wanted to achieve, and then give them time to sense make that and then start moving into the action, into the consensus reality. And to me, that is an expression of world work. And the way you came back and shared that with me was from a position of something greater than yourself. It was a position, you related that as something that you did. And I know how much prep you did, but you also did it with ease. And I don't recall you saying anything other than how naturally it flowed when you got in the room with those people.
Thanks, Pat. It's brought me back to memory, actually, of within that workshop. There was one of the leaders of this organization, and he said, we were having a chat at the whiteboard, and he was just going so well, and he said, I said to him, I said, this is really purposeful work, isn't it? This is the sort of thing which you're going to look back on your deathbed, and look back at this was a key moment. I always remember the look on his face. Are you the Grim Reaper? And it just hit him, and the reaction on his face will always live with me.
The experience for me, and I would say for most of us, is it's a state. It's something that we might achieve a part of the time. And there are people in the world for which this is their way of being. It's a trait. It's how they are. And I think the kind of goal is like, how do we get more access to that state more of the time?
What I love there is that you've brought it closer to home. Like I have this image of it. You know, you have to be Mahatma Gandhi, you have to be Buddha, you have to be Obama. You know, those kind of people which we know or believe we know, right? Whereas you're saying no, it can be closer to home, and these traits can be within all of us.
I reflect on the leaders that I've seen operate in this space, and they have this interesting way of being able to capture the people. And the cynical says those people have drunk the Kool-Aid, but there's something in that belief. So they create a belief, and you know, I think inherently we all want to believe in something, and if they can create that vision and the environment to be safe to follow that, it's very fulfilling and special. And if any of us that have been part of those moments, you reflect on them, you know, with a lot of fondness, and you build friendships and you build connection, and, you know, you do feel like a family. The question is, how do we create that if we are our own leaders, right? We're looking outside, but why can't we be that?
Given where the world is, I think we need more people on this journey. That starts with becoming conscious of our own leadership style and thinking about how do we grow this.
And that's certainly like a learning from us working in organizations that are looking for transformation. And what we've seen is leadership. There's two sides to this. One could be they could be the constraint of where that transformation will go, but we could also look at the other side of it. They could be the enabler for where this organization goes. And the difference between being a constraint and an enabler is the level of leadership, conscious leadership stage that they're at. So this is important work for anyone that wants to transform their organization. Sustainable change starts from within, inside out. So I just want to sum up then the truth of the impact of this stage. Here, I think we can see that confidence will be soaring in the face of modern world pressures. There'll be profound levels of personal fulfillment, not just in organization, but in life, and having an impact in the world that's larger than themselves. And they'll be absolutely unflappable in terms of adaptability and resilience in navigating any complexities or challenges thrown their way. So thinking about that bell curve now, where are you on the bell curve right now? Mostly. Look, we've already discovered you could be in multiple stages, but where's your center of gravity? Is it in erratic, managing, performing, or transforming? Let's take a moment to think of that. And then consider, what are your aspirations? What's your intention? Where do you want to be? Thinking about where you want to be. What steps will it take for you to progress your conscious leadership journey. Okay, that's wraps up our session. Just want to thank Julie, Kev, Padgett, all of you together for spending the time with us this afternoon. I really appreciate it.